Hello and Happy New Year. I want to welcome everybody to our webinar today. This is Tad Radzinski. Our topic is going to be Advancing Product Innovation, How to Utilize Your Stronger Supply Chain. I'm really excited to speak to you today on this topic. This is, for those of you that have been following along, this is the third in our webinar series on improving your supply chain sustainability and using your supply chain to not only improve the sustainability of your organization, but if you are a manufacturer, to be able to use the information and the activities you do with your supply chain as far as sustainability goes with improving your products and your operations and that kind of thing. So again, very excited to be with you today. Thank you all for joining, and looking forward to a good webinar over the next 30 minutes. As usual with our webinars, I will run through a series of slides and we'll be taking individual questions. So please type your questions into the question pane and I will be answering that at the end. I'll probably have 7 to 8 minutes available for questions at the end once we get through the slides. And actually your questions are very valuable, so the more you ask, the more specific I can be to your specific needs on what you're looking to do within your own organization. So I just want to remind everybody that we have our seminar coming up on April 20th, and we've got a good number of companies and people registered already. And just to remind you that every seminar that we do is a custom designed seminar. So what I mean by that is if you register or a group of people from your company register, first thing we're going to do is send you a questionnaire, and then we're going to do an interview with you to find out exactly what are some of your key aspects that you want to get or learn about within the seminar. And then based on that feedback and information from all the attendees, we customize the content and the workshops to be very specific to your organization. And oftentimes we have companies working in groups or people in groups that have similar needs, or over the past couple seminars that we've done, we've had companies send 5 or 6 people and work together. So we definitely plan to do that. So we're encouraging and asking people, if you are planning to come to the seminar, please register as soon as possible so we can get the training plan done and start to work out the workshop details and that kind of thing. So I look forward to seeing you all, and hopefully you can attend. The information on how to register is on the bottom of the screen here. So let's roll into our information that we're planning to cover today. And since it's been a while since we've had a webinar due to the holidays and the break, and now we're into 2016 and moving forward in a rapid manner, I just wanted to revisit some of the lessons that we learned from the last webinar we did when we talked about basically how to institutionalize sustainable supply chain right into your sustainability strategy, and how to integrate it into your new product development process and things like that. And the first thing we had mentioned was it's very important to, number one, identify and evaluate your suppliers. Whether you're a product manufacturer or you're an service organization, or an office that basically just provides consulting, or whatever you do, you're definitely going to be connected to the supply chain. So being able to know who those suppliers are, what they're supplying to you, and then developing a solid questionnaire around very specific to what your needs are, whether it's going to be data and information about the chemicals in the materials they send you, or if you're trying to support your sustainable purchasing program or your green cleaning program or your overall sustainability goals for your organization. You definitely need to know who you're working with, who the suppliers are. You need to collect data from them, usually in the form of a questionnaire, and then you use that data to improve either your organization and your product sustainability if you're a manufacturer. So again, some tips that we provided in the last webinar around that. Then we talked about integrating sustainable product attributes into the new product development process. I gave you some tips and ideas and examples of how you can do that. If you are a manufacturer, you typically go through a new product development process where you're basically following the stage gate process of, coming up with an idea, going through all kinds of development phases until you can finally roll the product out to market. And ideally, you want to be thinking about how you're going to make integrate sustainability right into the very beginning of that design process and the new product development process. So really important to do that. And then we also talked a lot about supplier training and the importance of that, or supplier conferences. We have a number of companies we're working with right now that are actually preparing to do their supplier conferences in the spring, where they're going to bring in all their suppliers, they're going to roll out some new initiatives, they're going to talk about sustainability, they're going to talk about reporting requirements and review questionnaires and things like that. So really important to get everybody on the same page in order to get the information you need. So building upon that, let's assume that you've gone through the process and you've sent out your questionnaires that we talked about in the last webinar. You've gotten some data back from your suppliers, and it's important to remember that that data is really valuable for many things. If you're a manufacturer, it's going to help you to take that information and feed it right into your new product development process. But if you're a company that's, maybe serving as a, maybe you're a hotel chain, or maybe you're a restaurant or food service or something like that, then you're going to have different needs, and you're not really manufacturing products, but you're going to want to understand some of the sustainable aspects of your supply chain. For example, are they providing you with products with recycled content? How are they transporting goods and services? How are they connected to you in your overall sustainability goals? And once you have that information, it helps you to, not only understand the sustainability of the operations and the materials and the chemicals in the products from suppliers, and you can use that then for your new product development process or product transparency if you're going to publish EPDs or HPDs. And EPD is an environmental product declaration, and HPD is a health product declaration. It's also really valuable for understanding risk, and I'm going to talk about risk a little more in another slide here, but you do have some risk issues with suppliers. Not only can it be in the fact that maybe, there's only one supplier and, you're limited if there would be some kind of service disruption with them. For example, we had a client that was buying products from a supplier in China, and when the tsunami hit a few years ago, it basically wiped out the factory, and suddenly they didn't have that supply chain anymore. So it could be that drastic, or it could be other things, and we'll talk about that shortly. It could be very useful also, this data, for doing a materiality assessment. If you're trying to understand where your company needs to go for the next 1 to 5 years, conducting a materiality assessment is really valuable, and understanding the suppliers that provide products or services or parts to you is going to be really helpful for that. And then if you're doing sustainable purchasing or green cleaning or any other those other different initiatives, getting this data from your suppliers is going to be very helpful for that as well, and really using that information to build upon where you want to go as an organization, where you want to go with your products. Really good stuff, to move the ball forward with your sustainability initiatives and your strategy. So I mentioned a couple of the supply chain risks, and supply chain is, when you're working with your supply chain, it helps you identify the risks, but it also helps you identify opportunities. And for example, I mentioned the risk if you have a single source supplier and suddenly some significant event happens, like the tsunami in Japan, and you suddenly lose that supplier. That's a big problem. And being aware of that and understanding the supply chain is very important. That's really critical then when you're doing your materiality analysis of your company. Wow, we only have this one supplier, that's a big risk to us. What are we going to do to minimize the risk or the impact of that? Another thing that you have to look at here is also compliance with regulations or company policies. If you're making products that are required to meet certain regulations like REACH or RoHS, or California Prop 65, or different things like that, you need to make sure that the parts, the materials, the products that the suppliers are sending you are in compliance with whatever those requirements are, because if you violate something in California for Prop 65, that could mean a significant fine for you. Or if you're not meeting requirements for REACH in certain countries, it could be fines or loss of business or different things like that. And I also mentioned on here company policies. For example, let's say that you're a company and you do have a sustainable purchasing policy, then if you have certain requirements on the products you're purchasing, you're going to want to know that your suppliers are meeting those, and the only way to do that is to get proof and documentation from them for that. Another thing that you can do when you're analyzing your suppliers is to really get an understanding of where your big impacts are. And when you're doing materiality analysis or life cycle assessment, you're going to really drill down into what's happening with the suppliers, what the products and materials are supplying, and it'll give you an idea to know, hey, we maybe can work with this supplier to decrease overall greenhouse gas emissions or carbon footprint. With the activities that just happened in France with COP21, looks like there's going to be a lot of movement in this direction. So it's going to be important to really get your suppliers engaged in that if you really want to make a big change. Another thing it could be is maybe centered around working conditions, fair wages, all that kind of thing, depending on where you're getting products from or where you're buying materials or parts or whatever. Really important to understand all that, and looking at the supply chain is going to be critical to understand those things. I wanted to talk about two quick case studies here to give examples of what I mean here. Here's an example of Intel. Intel made a commitment that they were going to be conflict-free, and what that means is they didn't want any conflict minerals within any of their products. So they had to reach out to their supply chain, work very closely with them, and do due diligence to really understand where some of these critical metals were coming from, things like tantalum and tin and gold and different things like that, and verifying that they were in compliance with the Dodd-Frank Act and that kind of thing. So in this particular case, as you look at this slide, the folks from Intel worked very closely with their supply chain, basically sending out, my guess is they sent questionnaires, suppliers had to provide information, and then had to verify that they were, in compliance with or conformance with the requirements of the Dodd-Frank Act and that kind of thing. So here's an example of a manufacturer and how they've attacked it. But then I have another example here from Coca-Cola, and I mentioned in the last webinar how it's really important to do supplier summits or supplier conferences and what the value of those is. And I know Coca-Cola started this back in like 2010, 11, 12, they were doing this. And when they worked with their suppliers, they were asking them did some education and training with them, and then we're asking them on proposals on things they could do around sustainable packaging or logistics or agriculture or water stewardship, portfolio innovation, all kinds of great things. And it turned out to be so great. They got over 200 different proposals that gave them really great ideas on where they should go and information they should utilize to advance their overall sustainability initiatives within Coca-Cola. Now Coca-Cola, I understand, does this on an annual basis, and they award top suppliers for innovation, sustainability, quality, and value. And the biggest lessons learned here was having this global summit and communicating with the suppliers really drove this to be a benefit for not only Coke, but a benefit then for the suppliers, because number one, I can guarantee it helped the suppliers save money. I can also guarantee that the suppliers that wanted to really play and work with Coca-Cola probably ended up making more sales and getting favorable status and things like that. So that's a really important thing, and this is how you would use these various strategies we've been talking about to advance the sustainability of your own organization using your supply chain. So now let's talk a little bit about if you are a manufacturer or you are even a person or a company that's purchasing products that are manufactured, how you might want to see someone moving forward to develop more sustainable or greener products. And one way that could be done would be through integrating what we call sustainable product innovation into the stage gate or new product development process. This is an area that's very important, and just about every company that makes something follows a stage gate process. And this is an example of a checklist that would be integrated into the new product development process. You can see here we're talking about gate 2, because it's stage and gate process, and different things that should happen in gate 2. For example, look here, evaluate sustainability of the supply chain, evaluating your raw materials, considering transportation distances, selecting suppliers that have a sustainability program or policy. So this is how you can embed this right in, and I can guarantee that just about everybody who's working within a supply chain, you know, they're busy focusing on getting products out the door and that kind of thing, and being able to be a member of the new product development team and realizing you need to ask these questions is going to help drive this into your own process. Another thing we talk about here is evaluating chemicals of concern, and you know, you're getting that information from your suppliers, and I'll show an example of that shortly. But these are all really good things to help you, and by embedding this right into the new product development process, it makes sure that everybody is on the same page and continues to do that in a consistent manner. Also, reminder, you know, if you are working on manufacturing products and trying to understand where the impacts are, conducting life cycle assessments is going to be very valuable for this. It's usually something we integrate into almost every new product development process, which allows you to collect data and information from your suppliers, which helps you to conduct your LCAs, to develop your environmental product declarations or health product declarations. And you can't develop a health product declaration if you don't know the chemicals and materials within the parts or materials that you're receiving. So whether you're a manufacturer that's going to create an HPD, or you're a company that has certain chemicals you don't want to be brought into your facility, or you don't want to be purchasing certain chemicals or materials, getting that supplier information is going to be really critical for that as well. And there are other types of material ingredient reporting. For example, Google has their own material ingredient reporting requirements. Walmart's starting that now. Also Target and other companies have black lists or red lists of chemicals they don't want to be using within their facilities. So again, different ways and information can come from this. And all of these require that you are doing a detailed review of your supply chain, collecting the information and the data, and then helping you to drive forward with your work in the marketplace. So I want to show you an example of how supplier data can help really drive things forward. These are actual sanitized examples of work that we have done in the past. And this first one I want to show you is a questionnaire that was submitted to a supplier to understand the chemicals that were in the products that they were supplying. And this was to verify compliance with REACH. And basically, you can see here, they filled out the questionnaire, they supplied information on the chemicals that were in the products by CAS number, percent by weight, we needed that, and then we did an analysis to determine if these materials exceeded any of the REACH compliance requirements for the various chemicals that are required to be reported and evaluated. And you can see here we actually found that there was a chemical that was exceeding the threshold. So that was a flag to us to make sure that we alerted the manufacturer we were working with, the supplier, that they had to figure out, okay, here's an issue, we need to figure out how we're going to deal with this so we can make sure we comply with REACH. The next example I'll show you is just a sample bill of material. This could be for any kind of a product. We do use a lot of electronics now in the world, and as you can see here, we might have a part number, we have a weight of that material as it goes into the product, we have the component, what is it, we have the material itself, then we have the supplier name, the supplier location, and then we have information on recycled content that was embedded here. This all came from collecting data through these questionnaires and whatnot, and is very useful for us to not only understand how these materials can fit into our life cycle assessment process, but then also to gain information on doing health product declarations, or providing information on meeting LEED requirements for regional materials or recycled content information. All that kind of stuff came from questionnaires that were then integrated into these spreadsheets for tracking. So again, good information here, and this is the kind of thing you want to be getting. Another thing I want to show you here is the value of supply chain. This was an actual company we worked with a while ago, and they were making a siding product, and LCA was completed on the siding, as you can see in the spider graph here. And what we did is we baselined the product, and based on that baseline analysis determined that if we really wanted to make a difference, we had to focus on reducing the use of certain materials within the product, And one way we could do that was go into integrating recycled content. So this particular company worked with their supply chain to say, hey, you already are supplying us some recycled content. We want to increase the amount of that. So how can we work together to do that? And they worked with their suppliers then to develop a whole recycling and take-back program to get siding that was taken off buildings and get it recycled and recovered and then integrated back into the process. So not only did it help them to create a closed-loop product, but it helped them to reduce their overall environmental impacts. As you can see here, global warming went down by about 22% just by integrating more recycled content. So from a new product development process or sustainable product innovation process, if they hadn't worked with this supplier, they wouldn't have been able to get more recycled materials, which wouldn't have allowed them to make these changes, which really improve their product. So this is one example of how getting this information is really helpful, and then keeping that communication going with the supply chain. Another key thing, if you're doing any kind of product certifications, or even if you're a company that buys products, to use in your business, and you want to be, tracking the sustainability of these products, getting the product certified or asking your suppliers to have their products certified is a great way to do that and understand that they are meeting your sustainable purchasing requirements and that kind of thing. And being able to gain gather all this information from the suppliers and to have a plan and a system for doing that streamlines the third-party certification process. As you can see, this particular label looks like a food label and tracks not only the product's specific attributes, which would require us to understand how much recycled content is in the product, how much rapidly renewable or renewable resource content, where were the products sourced from, all the things I showed you earlier feed into this. And then same thing with recyclable material, and then manufacturing specific data all gets integrated into this and all came from the supply chain, which makes things a lot easier when you're getting the third-party certifications. Next thing we want to do is think about how we're going to make this integrated within the process so it goes on for a long time. So a couple of tips I want to give you to improve your overall sustainability strategy is basically taking the information you've gained from your suppliers, using that data to improve your organization if you're not a manufacturer, to use it for your materiality assessment or evaluating your internal systems, or if you are a manufacturer, using that data I just showed you to make your products better. And you can refer back to the example I gave you on Intel that was going conflict-free, or the example where I showed you how the manufacturer was able to use their supply chain to obtain more recycled content, which had many benefits to improve their products. And then you definitely want to make sure you're integrating this into your sustainable product innovation process or new product development process. So I gave you an example of how you might do that with a checklist within the gateway process. And really remember, it's important to be aware of the risks to the overall sustainability of your organization by understanding your supply chain. The way we are structured these days, there aren't a lot of companies that manufacture everything under one roof. Like back in the days of Ford Motor Company in Detroit, Michigan, when they would basically build the entire car, make every part within their own factory. Those days are over. Now, most companies are sourcing many different materials from many different suppliers, and understanding what's going on in these different factories and countries and the chemicals they're using is all really important, because you don't want to have another situation like lumber liquidators or others that are been having issues here. So again, very good tips here that help you really institutionalize what you do in your supply chain. And looks like we've got about 4 or 5 minutes here, and I have a few questions coming in, so I'm gonna take these right now. The first question says, working in a small company sometimes leads to a lack of resources to basically contribute to these type of efforts. And the question is, how would you go about prioritizing how you're going to work with these suppliers and how you're going to be able to dedicate the time to that? Well, one thing that you can do is definitely want to be able to develop a good solid questionnaire and communicate with your supply chain. Typically you're going to work with whoever's involved with purchasing and that kind of thing. And like I had said before, really important for you to try to either have supplier training or build those supplier requirements right into the specifications so you can get the data in a timely manner without having a lot of resources on your end. And that information is going to be very valuable. And once you get it set up where it's basically part of the way you do business, it's going to make things go a lot easier in the future. Okay, I've got another question here. Next question is, what if a supplier does not have the type of information that you need? Well, we do see this quite often where we're dealing with different folks as far as trying to get information from them in regard to maybe compliance with REACH or ROSE or even conflict minerals, and they don't even understand what that even is. So they're going to either try to avoid the situation altogether and avoid responding to you, or they're going to make something up and send you information. The same thing happens a lot on recycled content questionnaires. People don't totally understand pre or post consumer, so they're just going to give me any number that I want to hear, and oftentimes they'll just say no. So the key there will be to understand what you're asking, and then if you are getting responses that don't seem correct, like for example, a lot of times we'll ask for recycled content on metals, and we know there's most likely going to be some recycled content in the metals. And if we get a lot of manufacturers saying no, especially from Asia or Vietnam or wherever we're asking this data from, then we'll go back to them and we'll either do some further education, or we'll connect with a company representative there. Maybe there's something lost in translation that we have to communicate. Then we work on providing that information to help them get that data for you. Okay, I've got looks like one more question here, and it says, are companies working with suppliers to help get them in compliance? How can suppliers engage with companies to be proactive? Well, that's a great one, and the way that I see that happening is really through running these supplier summits or conferences. The other option is to definitely do maybe webinar trainings or that kind of thing, or if you do have folks that go out and actually inspect these suppliers periodically, you can include this information into the audit checklist that you do if you're auditing your suppliers, or if you're having people on the ground that are visiting the facilities, maybe creating a fact sheet or a information sheet for them that tells them what you're looking for and what you would like them to provide to you. So that's one way you can get them to do that. And if they're struggling with, most of the time it's struggling with understanding. So getting them to understand is very helpful, and then that helps them as an organization as well. If you can show the benefits, it's going to benefit you as the company, whether you're a manufacturer or you're someone who's purchasing products and services. You get them to understand that, that's going to be very helpful, but they will really help them then, because they're most likely supplying to other folks in other companies that are going to be requesting this information as well. Okay, it looks like I have one more here. It says, how do you communicate the need for transparency to suppliers who are hesitant to share information or consider things proprietary? Oh, wow, that's a great one. We actually have that happen quite often. And the best thing we can do is basically educate them on the fact that if they can supply this data, it's most likely going to benefit them, because it's going to mean that whoever's asking for it is probably going to sell more product, which is going to mean that they're going to sell more materials, and that's really helpful to do, as you're trying to get them to see that. And then there's ways that you can work around confidentiality by asking, maybe they can sign an NDA with the consultant who's helping gather the data for the LCAs or the EPDs and HPDs, or there might be ways, like even with health product declarations, the supplier can go in and actually fill in the data themselves and list it as proprietary, which no one can really see some of the key aspects of that then. So those are some tips I would give there. So anyway, it looks like we're at the end of our time here. Thank you all for joining. We had a great turnout today. Thank you all who have registered for the seminar. To date, we are in process of getting ready for this. If you are thinking about registering, please get your registration in so we can start to get information from you to customize the training. And again, thank you all. Excited to have you on, and look forward to speaking to you on our next webinar, which will be on February 11th, and we're going to be talking about supply chain integration, more on training, sales, and marketing, and how you can basically maybe put on one of these summits or conferences. So again, thank you. Have a great day, and look forward to talking to you next month, and look forward to seeing you all April 20th at our seminar.